Thank you so much. Good morning. I am Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and I'm joined with some distinguished guests around the smart gun conversation. I want to thank them for coming out and being part of this important symposium, particularly the voice of our citywide advocate, the public advocate, Letitia James. I want to thank her for joining us, who has been a real champion around these public safety conversation. Also want to thank our New Jersey State Senate Majority Leader, Loretta Weinberg, and really appreciate her long battle to get the country to pull the trigger, excuse the pun, and moving in the right direction of smart guns. She was sharing some of that conversation with me this morning, and it was so important, her commitment to this important initiative. Ernst Mauch, firearms developer, Stephen Tourette, professor at Johns Hopkins, David Chipman, one of our panelists, Mark Glaze, a panelist, Dennis Hennigan will be a panelist, Margaret Hirsch, Smart Tech Foundation, and I really want to thank her for the smart gun design competition that we're participating in, and all the other attendees that are here to really have a real conversation in America about smart guns and moving the country in the right direction. And we look at this board that we have, the number that really jumps off of the page is over $200 billion in indirect costs to gun-related injuries and death. And oftentimes when people think about guns, they think about the criminal aspect of it. But the number that really should impact us all is 1/3 of those who are injured or are killed with guns are suicides or accidents. A child picks up a gun and it's his or her home, points that gun towards them and takes his life or a loved one's life, or someone who's depressed. The ready accessibility of a gun is a tool that's used to bring instant death. So someone who's going through a moment of depression makes a lifetime decision of taking his or her life. And the numbers are startling. I think when you think about in 50 years that we have lost more people killed to gun-related deaths than all of our wars combined. Really need to allow that to sink in. Our domestic embracing of the gun has done more to take the life of American than our foreign conflicts. That is something that we need to ensure that it comes to a conclusion. Of the 30,000 gun fatalities a year, roughly 2/3 are the results of accidents and suicides. The number of children who are killed or injured, 38% of gun-related deaths and injuries in this country is both sovereign and important for us to recognize that our young people are being harmed by these guns. And so this symposium gives us an opportunity to explore what are the opportunities. It is hard to believe in 1984 when I started policing, we were using a cassette tape, and you had to wait to decide which song you would listen to by allowing the songs to be in a sequence. Now we have moved in a smart direction and have gone from a dumb way of listening to sounds to a smartphone that would give us thousands of recordings and instant access to music. We started with a .38 revolver and a 9mm revolver in state troopers. That technology has not changed. The universe around guns have changed. We have introduced technologies in every aspect of our existence. The only area that has remained the same are the ways in which we use the gun. It was a .38 and 9mm in 1984. when we were using cassette tapes, when we moved to the iPhone, and we moved to Facebook, we moved to being able to do instant chat across the globe, Twitter, instant communication. All through that timeline, the only thing that has remained consistent, that we lost innocent lives and the gun mechanisms have remained the same. That is impossible to believe. We are much better than that as a country. We are much better than that as thinkers. We cannot continue to allow an 8-track mindset in an iPhone age to get in the way of how we move this technology forward. And I believe the push must come locally. Local heroes like the Senate Majority Leader in New Jersey and other local heroes all across the country who have moved this conversation forward must be part of the initiative of how do we solve this problem. And so we take our hats off to New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, Washington Ceasefire, who have remained consistent in forcing government to embrace this conversation. These are common sense gun laws. I own 3 guns. There is no call for Americans to abandon their right to bear arms. There is a call for us to abandon the right to do harm. That is the call. Thousands of families go through the ritual of being notified by law enforcement agencies that they lost their loved one due to gun-related violence. And if we use technology to ensure that the gun that's in the hands of a legal person can only be used by that person, then we move this conversation and remove the safety 1,000 yards forward. So we're asking the NRA, we're asking all gun advocates not to believe that we are on separate sides of this conversation. We're on one team, Team America, Team Safety, Team Insurance, that our families don't go through the horrific tragedy of losing a loved one through accidental discharges or through an illegal action of someone having an illegal gun and able to use it because we did not embrace the technology that's available. And so I want to bring on a few speakers at this time. First, the public advocate of the city of New York, followed by Senator Weinberg, the New Jersey State Senate Majority Leader.
I want to thank Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. As most of you know, as the former city council member, Borough President Adams was a detective in the precinct where I live, in the 88th precinct. And so he knows, yes, he was. He led us to safety, and it was an honor and a pleasure to work with him when I was a member of the city council, and I thank him for all of that. And I thank him for bringing us together with this creative and a talented pool of students to bring the use of smartphones into fruition. And of course, I want to thank my friend Leah Barrett, the Executive Director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence and Washington Ceasefire, as well as the Senator from New Jersey. As most of you know, I've been involved in technology for a very long time. I've worked with Commissioner Bratton and Commissioner Kelly on a wide range of issues, including ShotSpotter, which is now all over the city of New York. And as most of you know, I was the first one to call for body cameras on members of NYPD in the city of New York. And so I have embraced technology, and I believe that it's now time to move our city forward with respect to innovative and smart technology, which is used in all industries to make our lives easier and safer. It is breaking ground technology that holds the possibility of saving lives. Smart guns do not take away Second Amendment rights, and so I don't understand why the NRA or Congress hasn't pushed for the use of this technology. And as gun violence continues to plague too many communities and too many homes around this country, unfortunately in central Brooklyn last night we had several shootings. We will not allow the NRA's control over Washington to continue putting us and our children in harm's way. The gun industry and the NRA, their unwillingness to endorse and manufacture smart guns has forced us to take action into our own hands with our very own smart gun design competition. As I've indicated before, because of Congress's intransigence, it's really up to municipalities and up to states in order to engage in more action to address gun violence, which is why I've been in the forefront of making sure that we divest from gun manufacturers and gun retailers in this country, and I'm so glad that we passed that resolution last week. The creation and implementation of safe gun technology is a common sense measure that will ensure that if guns end up in the wrong hands, they can't be fired by those bad actors. We have a moral responsibility to act in any way we can to prevent the gun violence that is killing our children and our loved ones, and creating safe gun technologies is no longer merely an idea. Every day we see technological advancements in our cars, our healthcare, and our phones, and a logical extension of that progress would extend to guns. I know that a number of individuals have indicated, as well as members of NYPD, that there's too many kinks in the armor and that we've got to wait until we see such time as we refine the system. And all that we are having today is a discussion. I believe we need to have a discussion, we need to have some pilots, and we need to study this industry going further. We have an obligation to consider every option in an effort to reduce gun violence. Smart technology is the next frontier, and I look forward to working with these brilliant minds and these companies all across this country as I continue to push this administration to bring smart technology into the 21st century and into New York City. I thank the Borough President, and I thank all of you here today, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and Senator Weinberg.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Borough President Eric Adams for hosting us today. Although I appeared at the Seattle ceasefire, Seattle, Washington, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I said it was easier for me to get to Seattle than it was to get from New Jersey to Brooklyn this morning, in case anybody's interested. But it is a pleasure to be here too with Professor Stephen Terrett, with whom I participated in the White House conference on moving ahead with childproof technology. I have been involved with this odyssey, as I explained to the Borough President, for a little bit more than 14 years, when we passed the first bill in the state of New Jersey, which mandated that once this technology was developed and it set certain standards, that would be within 3 years after the development of that technology, that would be the only kind of gun one could buy, the only kind of handgun one could buy in the state of New Jersey. And it kind of went along quietly for a number of years. Johns Hopkins gave some grants to New Jersey Institute of Technology to continue studying the development of this technology. And as it started to get a little bit closer, the NRA and the Second Amendment people felt it necessary to get involved. About a year or so ago, there were 2 guns put on the market, one with a bracelet and one with a ring technology. One store in the state of Maryland and one in California decided to put those guns on the market, though it would not have, use the phrase, triggered the bill into law in New Jersey because it didn't meet our standards. But the NRA haunted these people until they were frightened and actually took that limited technology off the market. So I sent out a challenge to the NRA to say, okay, I will work to rescind the law altogether if in fact the NRA and the Second Amendment folks would make a public pledge not to interfere with the research, development, manufacture, or sale of such a gun. After all, this is not about taking guns away from anybody. This is merely about making what is really a deadly consumer product and making it safer. Just like we make cribs safer so babies can't get their heads caught in between slats, or we mandate that automobiles have to have airbags and seatbelts. Didn't seem to me that this would be the kind of requirement that would trigger that kind of national outcry. Well, I sent this challenge to the NRA. I followed it up in writing and never, ever received even one of those "thanks for your letter" replies. So without them, we went ahead and passed a bill, both houses of the legislature in New Jersey, that changed the original bill and said when such technology is available, a retailer must offer it for sale, but nobody has to buy it. Our governor in New Jersey, who you might have heard at one point was auditioning for president and then vice president, and now some other position in a cabinet that I hope never comes to actuality, just pocket vetoed that at the end of last year. So we have now passed a new bill, essentially the same of what I just outlined, along with the way for a retailer to opt out if they have a real appropriate reason to do so. That bill now sits on the governor's desk, and we will see what the governor, his name is Chris Christie, in case any of you might not know, what his next move will be in terms of this, what I think is a bill that would just move us into the 21st century. After all, it is already on our way to the first quarter of that century. So hopefully with the now involvement of the White House, with the president himself, and with Vice President Joe Biden, we will actually see some movement here, which will not only make guns safer, so that we don't find 4-year-olds who accidentally shoot their 6-year-old neighbor, issue that happened not too long ago. And who knows, this technology, if developed, can be used in many, many other ways, and I know will spawn new startups and new industry. And I want to again thank the Borough President and all the people standing behind me, particularly Professor Tara. We have been discussing this for, I guess, 14 years on or about. So I'm delighted to be here, and hopefully it will be a step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Mauch, firearm developer. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we want to hear from Professor of Johns Hopkins, Stephen Tarrant.
I too want to thank the Borough President Eric Adams for making this event possible, and all those who have worked with him. He and Ralph Ascitelli, who I hope you will hear from in a moment, have pulled together essentially what's the dream team of smart guns to come and talk with you about how close we are to coming to reality. So this has been a long haul for me also, Not that I want to top the majority leader of the New Jersey Senate, who's saying that this has been 12 or 14 years, but I started on smart guns about 35 years ago, and yeah, 35 years ago. And there have been different hurdles that we had to get over. One hurdle, the first hurdle, was technology. Is it possible to make a smart gun? So many people told us no, it was not possible. They came up with all different kinds of ideas as to why it's not possible. Ernst Mauch, who you'll hear from, has proven that to be incorrect. He makes these guns. It is possible to make these guns. So then there are other hurdles. There are hurdles of maybe there's something legally infirm about these. I went to law school about 2 blocks from here. I'm from Brooklyn. Who says you can't come home again? There are no legal impediments. That is being solved as we speak by the work of Senator Loretta Weinstein in New Jersey, and it will spread with other people in other states. Then the next hurdle is that, well, no one will want them. And in order to paint that hurdle a day-glow orange for people, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, known as NSSF, which is the trade association of the American gun manufacturers, did a survey. And they found that at most 14% of people would be interested in buying a smart gun. Actually, when they came up with that a few years ago, I thought, really, 14%? That's not bad. Because if you were the marketer of a children's breakfast cereal and you were told that you could have another 14% penetration into the market of breakfast cereals, you'd be dancing in the corporate hallways hearing that. But because it was the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which ironically is located in Newtown, Connecticut, a couple of miles from where the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was, and being an academic, I worried somewhat about the methodology that they used. So we did a different survey. When I say we, I'm talking about folks at Harvard University, at Northeastern University, and Johns Hopkins University working together. And in this survey, we had about 4,000, just shy of 4,000 adults, representing a sample of the American adult population. And one of the many questions that we asked them, and I'll read you the exact question, was, if you were to purchase a new handgun, how willing would you be to purchase a child-proof gun that fires only for authorized users? Remembering that National Shooting Sports Foundation said maybe 14%, our results were 59% of the American population would do that. That's an enormous number, 59%. That's actually 59% who said that they were either very willing or willing to do so, but another 23% were undecided, and only 18% of those surveyed, those almost 4,000 people, said no, they would be unwilling to do it. We analyzed the data further. We looked at the gun owners among those almost 4,000 people. And when we asked those gun owners that very same question that we asked everyone, 43% of them said that they would be willing to buy a child-proof gun that works only for the authorized user, which we could call a smart gun, which we could call a personalized gun, which we could call an owner-authorized gun, all being synonymous terms. So the barrier that had been fictionally erected in front of us that the public wouldn't want it is now demolished. The public wants it. So what keeps us now from seeing smart guns on the marketplace, the civilian marketplace? Well, there are a couple of things. Number one is we need to work with police personnel. And that in part is why I'm just particularly thrilled that the Borough President, who spent more than 2 decades as a law enforcement officer, and his colleagues are interested. It's also the White House that's very, very interested, and later in the event today, I'll spend a couple of minutes describing what's going on with the White House and the Justice Department and the National Institute of Justice. So that's one barrier. But we also want not just law enforcement officers, we want civilians to be able to buy these guns. So another barrier is we need money to be infused into this area. It's hard for someone to just start manufacturing smart guns. There's some work to be done setting up the factory, the machinery, the equipment, and Ernst can tell you about that far better than anyone in the room. But we're making progress with regard to the money. People are becoming more and more interested in doing that. And Margot Hirsch, who had been standing there watching my backpack with my iPad in it, and who's now disappeared, so let me express a personal worry about that. Margot Hirsch of the Smart Tech Challenge Foundation is also doing amazing work in trying to bring venture capitalists into this field to invest here so that they can do well financially by doing good socially. So we are almost there. We are so close that I've said this before that I can almost taste it. I can smell. I have a German Shepherd. I watch how she smells things before I know they're about to happen. I can smell success. It's just a tiny bit ahead of us. And with the work of the people who are standing here today, with what Ralph is doing, with what the members of the panel who are about to speak in a little while are doing, we will achieve success. And what success means in this case, the definition of success, is that for the latest year for which United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has statistics, that being the year 2014, that year, 2014, there were 33,599 people who died in front of the barrel of a gun. That is shameful. That doesn't need to exist. Success for us won't be bringing that number, 33,599, to zero. I believe that unfortunately is an unachievable goal, but we will be able to bring down those numbers. We'll be able to save the lives of little kids who were shot by other little kids who don't even realize that the gun is a real gun rather than a toy gun, and they unwittingly pull a trigger. Why do we make a gun that a 4-year-old can operate and shoot a sibling? We'll save lives of depressed teenagers, as the borough president was saying, who sometimes think that they'll try to achieve a permanent solution through suicide for what was probably a temporary problem. The gun won't work for them, and will achieve success in bringing down the number of firearm-related homicides in the United States, because, as this chart says, there's somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 guns stolen from homes and burglaries every year. Those guns enter the illicit market and are used in crime and mayhem, and those guns will be inoperable because they're smart guns. So we're going to reap an enormous savings, and we're almost there now, and with your help, we will get there soon. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And I wanted to really round it out with our two partners, and I want to thank them for their patience. Both Ralph Kelly, President of Washington, ceasefire, and closing with my good friend Leah, Executive Director of New York Against Gun Violence. Ralph?
Thank you, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. Thanks for your support on this issue, and everybody else behind us. This is the largest gathering of perhaps the most promising path forward to reduce gun violence in our society. And what we hope to accomplish in the summit today is this cross-pollination of thinking, and we're very optimistic we can do that because we have the holy trinity of smart gun issue leaders here, and Ernst Mauch, who came all the way from Germany, the only individual who's actually successfully developed a commercially available smart gun Stephen Tourette, who is truly the godfather of this industry, and he is our true north, and what he has done to show that there is real demand from this. He's validated that 2 out of 5 gun owners would indeed buy a smart gun. And of course, I think everybody's here in this room, New Jersey Senate Majority Leader Loretta Weinberg, who took that dangerous cross-country trip 18 months ago to Seattle and inspired us all to get more involved in this issue. You know what, I think it's fair to say that gun violence is perhaps our society's most vexing public health issue, and what Professor Tourette will say is that whether it's drunk driving or obesity or cigarette smoking, there are 3 proven and viable approaches to reduce a public health crisis. One is legislation, and we all know, despite the good intentions of the Democrats, and we take inspiration from them on Capitol Hill, that it is going to be very difficult to pass meaningful legislation on gun violence. The other approach is education, and programs like Asking Saves Kids, encouraging people for safe storage. But because of the gender gap on this issue, where women are not so pro-gun and men are, it's even difficult to have conversations within households in safe storage. That's why we look to technology as the 3rd leg to reduce this public health crisis, and that's why we're so inspired. But one of the objectives here is to raise the profile of smart guns. You know, there's a lot of talk in universal background checks, and some might see that as a panacea. And we believe universal background checks are important, as are banning assault weapons. But those 2 approaches by themselves are probably only going to make a 2 to 5% dent in gun violence. There is reason, anecdotal that it may be, that smart guns over time can reduce gun violence by 10 to 20%. And when you consider that since the year 2000, since January 2000, we've lost over 500,000 Americans to gun violence, we'll take that 10 to 20%. That could potentially be 100,000 lives saved and another 250,000 injuries prevented by smart guns. And smart guns, as Professor Tourette mentioned, save it in a number of ways. There are 21,000 suicides. A number of those, thousands of those, are third-party suicides, where somebody commits suicide, uses somebody else's weapon. We know from suicide studies that if we can delay that impulse an hour or 2 and make it more difficult for them to procure lethal means, i.e. by using a smart gun that's inoperable, we can reduce by thousands third-party suicides. We know that there are 1.6 million children living in homes with unlocked guns. Smart guns can prevent almost all the accidents there as well. We know that there are a number of domestic violence occurrences where typically a woman has a gun for protection and she's overpowered by an ex-lover. That can be prevented by smart guns. We know that there are probably a half dozen police in a given year, and one of the police's biggest fear is to have their gun taken away. When a perpetrator takes a policeman's gun away and uses it against him, that can be prevented by smart guns. And as Professor Tourette mentioned, there are somewhere between 250,000 to 500,000 stolen guns annually. Crimes that are committed with those stolen guns would almost all be prevented. So one of our hopes is to get more consensus on this, but we're not concerned about product viability. We're not concerned about demand. We understand the potential. We want to raise the profile. We want this to be an election year issue. We want, when people talk about gun violence, to be the technology approach to reducing gun violence, specifically smart guns, to be part of that vernacular. And that is what we're here today to push forward, and we thank you all for giving this the attention it deserves. Thank you. And with that, I'll introduce Leah Gunn Barrett with New Yorkers Against Gun Violence.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph, and thank you, Borough President Adams and Public Advocate Letitia James and everyone else here, and Senator Weinberg for your leadership in this area. New Yorkers Against Gun Violence supports anything that's going to reduce gun violence, death, and injury. 117,000 Americans are shot every year, an astonishing figure. That's 84,000 wounded, some with life-altering injuries, such as spinal cord injuries, and then, as we've heard, over 33,000 killed every single year. It's something that we are unique in the United States among developed countries.
And I think the public health approach is really what we should be looking at. This is not a political issue. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It's completely moot, in fact. What is the public health approach? You make the product safer, you regulate where necessary, and you require that the user of the product be properly trained, particularly using something that is designed to kill human beings. So this smart gun technology pretty much addresses the product safety issue. And the gun industry has rejected, the simplest things that can make guns safer, such as a loaded chamber indicator, increasing the squeeze on the trigger so a 2 or 4-year-old couldn't shoot themselves. So it's clear, they're not going to be doing anything on their own, and they have been exempted. They're not regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Toy guns are regulated, teddy bears are regulated, real guns are not. So this clearly needs to happen. Gun violence is always going to be a feature of our nation, unfortunately. Guns don't wear out. That's the funny thing. And so if this actually becomes a reality on the marketplace, we're going to have to figure out a way to get off the market all the dumb guns out there and get the smart guns in people's hands, and I'm sure that can be thought through. Here in New York, we've been pushing for firearms safe storage laws, requiring gun owners to lock up their guns when they're not in their immediate possession or control. You would think that would be a law already. In fact, the only state that has a safe storage law currently is Massachusetts. New York is moving in that direction. Our big 5 cities, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and New York City, already have firearms safe storage laws. And just the past year, we've added 2 more cities, Albany, the capital, and Saratoga Springs, and also Westchester County has a firearms safe storage law. So we're going locally, which is where you can get things done. I agree that Congress, particularly this Congress, is not going to do anything. In fact, they've actually harmed Americans through giving the gun industry immunity from civil lawsuits, cutting off gun violence research, and stymieing any kind of sensible gun regulations. So it's down to the states, and it's down to even municipalities. In New York, we do not have preemption, which is good, which means that local governments can take steps beyond what state law requires. Just yesterday in Elmira, New York, a 12-year-old child was unintentionally shot and killed. The firearms safe storage law that we want here in New York is named for another 12-year-old child shot and killed in 2010, Nicholas Nomkin. He was killed in Saratoga Springs on a play date. So this kind of preventable gun violence would be stopped with smart guns. The other thing we've been looking at are firearm thefts. New York State has a law that if you notice your gun has been lost or stolen, you must report it. We're trying to get our hands on the data. It's proving difficult. We have foiled the New York State Police. I've talked to the governor's office to ask them to please release the data for the 62 counties in New York. We have been going county to county on our own, talking to police departments, and we do have some interesting data. From Suffolk County, for example, we know that every year at least 100 firearms are reported lost and stolen, just in Suffolk County and Long Island. New York City, we managed to get data for the year, not broken out by borough or anything. So over a number of years from 2011 to 2015, 181 pistols were reported lost and stolen. Every single one of those goes into the illegal market. This is just the tip of the iceberg. These are the ones that are actually reported. And what's really fascinating to me is if you look at the ATF report, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, since 2012, they've been producing reports on lost and stolen firearms from licensed dealers, from businesses that sell guns. And what's absolutely fascinating to me when I look at this data is in 2013 and 2014, the state of New York was audited by the ATF. So they went around and looked at all 2,000 licensed dealers in the state of New York. And they found that in 2013, there were reported 3,174 lost and stolen guns from licensed dealers. And the national figure was 19,601, that's 20%. And then in 2014, New York was audited again, and the number reported lost and stolen by dealers, licensed dealers, was 4,017 out of a total of 19,229. And then what's truly fascinating is in 2015, New York was not audited, and the number reported lost and stolen was 312. This pattern continues for states that are audited. Arkansas was audited in 2015. Their number of lost and stolen was 1,500. and in years when they were not audited, it was in the hundreds. So there's a real problem with gun trafficking and licensed dealers evading the law as well. And I think smart guns would certainly help deter the problem of trafficking, which is huge, particularly here in New York State, where guns are trafficked in from the south along the Iron Pipeline, ending up our communities, killing and maiming New Yorkers. So we're happy to be here. We're happy to provide any support we can, and let's get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll open the floor up to any questions before we start the formal part of the summit. Okay, great. Thank you.